There's a well-known saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, and I really couldn't agree more. And anyone who knows me will know that I am really a chronic planner, and I plan pretty much everything. I have an Excel spreadsheet for everything in my life, but it's worked for me so far, so yeah, I'm going to keep going. So let's get into it. Why would you bother to plan your meals in advance? So number one, less stress. Who hates that question? What's for dinner every night? Suddenly you're going to make a whole load of decisions. You often make it quite rushed, your mind goes blank, you can't think of anything, and you usually end up having something quick, easy, something you had last week, usually, you know, something not very inspiring or inventive or inspiring, and it's usually, yeah, not very healthy. This is called decision fatigue, and it happens to all of us living busy lives. So having a plan in advance can really help take this stress away. So when you know what you're having, when the ingredients are already there, the chances are it's going to be something a bit more interesting as well, and most likely healthier. Which brings us into the next one quite nicely. So you're more likely to make a healthier choice if you plan in advance. So you're thinking with the logical front part of your brain, and you're not thinking with that reactive base of your brain, the amygdala. So we often choose unhealthy foods because they're convenient, but when the healthy food and the recipe and the ingredients all in your kitchen, that becomes so much more convenient, and it's much easier to then choose to stick to it, to make that choice for that dinner that night. If you plan to cook at home, that meal is much more likely to be lower in calories. It's likely to be higher in whole foods, higher in vegetables, and lower in additives and other nasty chemicals and things that get put in foods. So your overall diet quality is going to massively improve if you plan to cook at home. And also when you plan ahead, you're much more likely to eat in the way that you want to eat. So you can eat in line with your goals. So for me, that's eating seasonally, that's eating healthy, making sure I've got lots of vegetables. For other people, you know, also for us, it's eating less meat as well. But you're much more likely to hit all these goals if you're thinking about it in advance and not just reacting and coming up with something in the moment. And that's also going to help you hit your goals around health. So whether you're trying to lose weight, have more energy, have better skin, better hair, all of these things are going to be much easier to do when you're planning. Number three, you're going to save money. So going around the shops without a plan leaves you much more at the mercy of the temptation of buy one get one frees and other deals and things that are on the end of all the naughty things always on the end of the shelves, aren't they? They're always on offer. And it's very easy just to pick those up thinking, oh, cheap, cheap, cheap. But of course we all know pounds add up quickly. It's also hard to add it up in your head when you are just going around picking things up off the shelves as you go. So if you're on a tight budget, it can be very hard to know if you've gone over the amount that you kind of had allocated for food that month or that week. And you're also, if you're planning a meal in advance, you're also much less likely to end up having resorting to takeout, which is always a much more expensive way of eating. And you're also going to reduce your food waste. And food waste in the bin is literally like throwing money away. So we used to throw out a lot, especially when we first started trying to eat more vegetables and be a bit more healthy, because vegetables really don't last for that long, especially we don't know how to store them very well. And we were buying without a plan at that point, so we would go around the shops and just be like, oh yeah, we'll have some of these veg, this, but without a plan we ended up not using it, and it ended up going off and going in the bin. Whereas now we hardly throw anything away because all the veg, everything is planned into the meals. And I have some good meals that I know I can sort of mop up anything extra if the carrots were bigger than planned or whatever. So, next one, variety. Variety is the spice of life, and it's so much more likely to happen when you plan your meals. So before we planned, we used to exist off the same almost 5 meals a day. Trying to think, I think it was something spaghetti bolognese, chicken curry, chicken korma. Definitely 2 of them in there. I think shepherd's pie. Of the things that we would cook, there was a very limited amount. Carbonara, we used to do carbonara. And I can still remember them because they're these sort of really just meals that just always just come up first, and we used to eat them all the time. But that's really boring. And not only is it really boring, it's not good for the world, it's not good for the environment, it's not good for your gut health. You need to be putting in as much variety of food as you can to really increase the diversity of your gut microbiome and get all the benefits that having all those healthy bacteria in your gut are going to have. And also for the world, loads of monocultures of the same foods and the same things is not healthy for nature, for biodiversity. We should be eating a whole range of different foods and growing a whole range of different foods, both for ourselves and for the planet. And that is a whole other topic, of course, but I wrote a post about it, which I will link to in the resources in case you want to have a read. Okay, knowing what you're cooking also for the rest of the week also helps you to batch cook. And batch cooking, I love batch cooking. I love knowing that you know, if I double the rice one night, then I don't have to cook any rice the next day, for example. Or knowing that if I make double of the sauce, then I've got that maybe for lunch the next day. I can freeze some for a really easy dinner, so you don't resort to takeouts. Then you can grab something you cooked yourself out of the freezer. And all of this is much easier to do when you're planning, because you plan to buy double the ingredients. You make sure you've got the time, because chopping up twice as much veg takes twice as much time. So by planning this all in, you can make sure that you can have all the benefits of batch cooking and the time saving and that gives you, and the joy of not having to cook all night because you know you did it yesterday. Brilliant, winning. Okay, so while we're talking about the good points, I think it's worth probably talking about addressing some of the negatives and some of the bad points that people talk about meal planning, and some of the excuses that we use not to bother. So the first one is time. Now, obviously meal planning takes some time. You have to set some time aside for it, and it does feel like a waste of time. But actually I believe it saves time over the week overall. That unplanned time when you're searching the cupboards every night trying to figure out what to have, trying to find things, it's very inefficient, and it is a total waste, especially when you don't end up eating properly at the end of it, or you end up having to pop out to the shops because you didn't have the right ingredients, or you need to get something extra. That's all waste of your time. So this is really about how we prioritise our time and what we value. So seeing that meal planning time not as a waste of time, but actually as a tool, a really useful way of achieving our goals, achieving what we want to be doing. So it's about switching the way that we think about it. It's really easy to find time to do things like scroll social media and these unnecessary sort of tasks that we end up just whittling our time away on, and then say we don't have time for the important things. But really that is prioritisation and time management. Some people say that meal planning is restrictive and it removes creativity and spontaneity. I say make it work for you. If having every meal planned all week feels too restrictive, don't plan them all week, just plan a few. I'm constantly chopping and changing my plan around. Sometimes I look at a meal and I think, I don't have time for that tonight, or actually I'd rather have tomorrow's dinner tonight. So I switch them. It's no biggie. We're a busy family. Sometimes the unknown happens, something crops up, sometimes you don't end up doing a meal that week. Maybe I can cook it the next day and put it in the freezer for another time, or maybe it can pop into the following week if all the things aren't going to go off. And if something you really want to eat suddenly pops up, you really just have that massive craving for something else, you've got the ingredients, go for it. So long as you're following your plan most of the time and it's fitting with how you want to be eating, it's fine. And then, let's face it, meal planning isn't exactly fun. There are things we would much rather be doing than meal planning. I don't think there's anyone that would say that they enjoy the actual act of meal planning. But hey, even for a compulsive planner like me, it's easy to put it off because it is a boring task, especially when you have to do it week in, week in, week out. So we need to change the way we think about it, because let's face it, so is brushing our teeth. No one enjoys brushing their teeth. So is doing the washing up, so is having a shower. We don't enjoy these things, but we do them because we see the benefit to our lives. We value that as something that has to be done. So that we need to get to the point where we're doing that with meal planning, and seeing that it's just as beneficial in our life. It needs to become a habit. So, whatever we're doing at the start, putting in reminders, putting in daily reminders, blocking time out in your diary to try and do it. Whatever you need in the early days to kind of get it set so that it becomes a habit that you just keep doing and you just don't even think about, like brushing your teeth. And lastly, people think it's hard. And it is if you don't really know what you're doing, don't have the right tools and resources, don't have a good plan. Just suddenly going with a piece of paper, what am I going to have? What am I going to have next week? Still, your mind goes blank. Surfing the internet for recipes is I hate. It can be quite difficult to find things. So it's all about having the right process and the right tools to follow through. And then it's not hard anymore. It's just a process that you just work through. And it becomes more and more straightforward as you get to grips with it and do it more and more times. So hopefully you're with me now in thinking that meal planning is totally worth it, and definitely worth investing a bit of your time in every week. In the next video, we're going to get you even more motivated to get going with this.